everyone. Welcome back. I'm Gabriel Allen Cummings,
And I'm Sonika Garcia, and this is Breaking the Code,
a podcast series by the Havas Medical Anthropology team. We're here to take the BS out of behavioral science by illuminating the why behind the what of behaviors, rituals, and symbols that people take for granted. We hope to arm you, our listeners, with the tools you need to make sense of behavioral science and help you apply to your work as communication extraordinaires.
All right. Today's episode, gosh, I feel like we have so many episodes. I'm losing track of how many, but it is our last episode of 2024, which is exciting. We have a lot of exciting content for everyone for 2025. So yeah, thank you all for listening through this year. We are joined by another guest this week, which is very exciting. I think I've said exciting like 10 times. We are joined today by Jenny Tsitsopoulos. Jenny is the medical anthropology practice lead. She's trained in trends. She's a trends forecaster and a futurist and has been leading our cultural efforts as part of Havas's new GLP-1 consultancy. So she's been working on some really cool projects. We got to have her on another episode to really, again, I don't think we've ever really talked about the consultancy on the podcast. So I'd love to have an episode about that and for Jenny to talk more about her background and kind of our efforts in that space because it's exciting stuff. Hi, Jenny. Welcome. Welcome to the podcast. You're finally here.
Hey, team. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So today's episode is all about Santa, right? Because it's about to be Christmas. And is Santa on a GLP-1?
That's a really interesting way to take us into the episode. I think it's one of the things about Santa Claus that we've seen, and you're getting an inside look into how these episodes come to be, is that we all ended up seeing Santa in one way or another looking, rather fit, in great shape, or skinny one way or another. I recently saw the Red One movie, the Dwayne Johnson Christmas movie, and J.K. Simmons, who is in great shape, was playing Santa. And one of my expectations was, he's going to wear a suit, he's going to stuff it with pillows or whatever actors do to, give that round Santa look. But no, instead they went in the opposite direction. They had him lifting weights, and The Rock was spotting him, and he was telling us how many calories he burns on Christmas Eve and how the cookies give him energy and everything like that. And as a viewer of it, I was like, wait a minute, this isn't what Santa is supposed to look like. And so Jenny also introduced us to a political cartoon where you have, and I'm going to try and paint the picture with my words here, but you have a Santa Claus who's marveling at how much space they have in their waist now, saying, thanks, Ozempic. And so that was really we're doing an episode on GLP-1s. We're doing an episode on Santa Claus. And we're doing an episode on, is Santa Claus changing? I think is, at a broad level. What happens when we make Santa Claus skinny, in shape, and just change the features of it? What changes? So I think as a first question, just to really introduce it, I'm curious, Sonika, Jenny, you're both moms of young children. Have you ever seen a Santa Claus, and I don't know if you celebrate it, but have you ever seen a Santa Claus that just didn't look quite right?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think even in addition to what you mentioned with Santa Claus changing, I think it was the Target commercial, right? Where Santa just does not look like himself. And I think there was a trend maybe last year, hot Santa. So, I mean, then I was like, what is going on? Is this going to stick? What is this going to become? I think the mall Santa, those have stayed pretty consistent. But yeah, I mean, for sure, I feel like Santa's changing. And kind of entering a space of, not just I think being thinner, that's the observable feature. That's the biggest difference. But I think also just the energy behind who Santa is and his role, right? I think we know Santa as, bigger, sort of just okay, I'm probably getting too into it, but sits in the North Pole, kind of is not out and about. But I feel like as we see Santa today, it's okay, this man has a life outside of just going down the chimney on Christmas Eve. That's really how I feel. And I'm curious. I want to get to know him a little bit better and see what he's all about. Jenny, what do you think?
I don't know if you all took a look at the SNL last week, but there was actually a play on the diversification of Santa. And when I was booking my Santa experience for my child, I was given an option between three different ethnicities of Santa Claus, just in terms
Wow.
of Santa is changing in his appearance, but one thing that has remained the same is his size and his features, the
Hmm.
jolliness of old Saint Nick.
Hmm.
And so for me, it's less triggering to see Santa in different colors and more along the lines of Santa losing his figure.
And that's a really interesting point too, because and Sanika, you brought it up in a really nice way. Santa's role, right? And so we think of Santa as, they're big and holly and jolly and really, I mean, going down the chimney. It was one of the questions, right? How does Santa go down the chimney when he's eating all these cookies and everything like that, right? But one of the things as we started digging into the episode a bit more is we actually came across this, Santa as we know it, big holly jolly, is not the Santa of how it like originated, right? This is we're talking about Saint Nick in the fourth century, going around what is now today Turkey, handing out presents. He was a clergyman. They didn't put a big emphasis on size like some people did in the past to show off abundance or wealth. The clergy was a bit of a opposite of that, where they were very thin. Saint Nicholas was very thin, and he's depicted as very tall, thin stature, still handing out gifts, still being very kind, but that gut that we all come to know Santa for is noticeably missing.
That's so interesting. So we created this version of Santa, and I think that started with the Coca-Cola Santa, right? Was the way that we sort of created this character that we now know Santa as. But like, yeah, to know that the background of his existence was not this, you know, jolly fat man is very interesting.
And it really speaks to like the idea that these icons, these things that we
Hmm.
believe to be certain and rock solid, can change. They have changed, and so when we're looking at possibly being on the cusp of having, perhaps jacked Santa, ripped
Hmm.
Santa, hot Santa, different things like that, it may be something that's a little difficult for people who grew up with, holly jolly fat Santa to, get along with. But I see this as something that perhaps generations, children or children's children's children may grow up and say like, I want to be ripped like Santa, which is, just a weird thing to say. But I think this really gets into what we were talking about. And again, just being in health advertising in 2024 means we always have GLP-1s on the brain one way or another. Really, what does it mean that Santa is changing, and in particular in this way? Santa counting calories and using Ozempic. I mean, the political cartoon again. I see this as like a health consciousness. Jenny, Sanika, what are you two seeing?
Look, Santa is a reflection of our times. I think that's what we're all saying. It's a reflection of cultural ideals. No matter how those ideals change over time, the Santa we know today is not going to be the Santa that our future children and their children will know tomorrow. But in terms of what it means about society and how it reflects on the society of today, slimming down might actually inadvertently signal that our happiness is tied to our health and our aesthetic appearance. Or more pointedly, just this idea of thinness, right? Challenging the narrative that joy and body positivity, which is somewhere we've been working so hard to get to, can coexist.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think at first, when you think about, I mean, for me, one of the biggest questions was, what does this like? How does this tie into like body positivity? I think Santa always symbolized, the fact that he was a bit heavier, always symbolized someone who's comforting, sort of non-threatening. I mean, it, like
Mhm.
doesn't really have not like problems, but just pure joy and happiness. Like I feel like that's always what his image signaled from a very early age that we got introduced to Santa, and then sort of looking back, if you I for this episode I kind of like digged into like what are other characters from our childhood that are sort of on the heavier side, and there are a bunch. So I think that from an early age we kind of have weight signaling something, this what this person is, which, what I just explained who Santa is. So I wonder, like, now the thinning down process, it kind of adds this, like, I don't know, this like seriousness of like, he's considering his weight. Like, what does that mean? Like, wait, is his mental health okay? Because I don't know. I think with body positivity, you brought it up, Jenny, it was always the body positivity movement, was created in large. I mean, of course, it was the fit to be okay and accepting and loving physical appearance, but it always translated into like, because what this is going to impact and how this is going to benefit our mental. And so, if you love yourself and you accept the way that you look physically, your mental health and your mental state will also improve. Now with GLP-1s, I think the sort of shift in the narrative is, well, now it's for your health. Again, the shift is away from like, okay, you're taking a GLP-1 to like maybe look better, but a lot of the narrative that we're seeing is like, no, it's to be healthier. Okay, well then to be healthier should also now positively impact mental health. So it's almost like replacing, but I don't think we're still as a society accepting that, like, we're basically saying, thinner is better, and like we're still not fixating on the physical. I think that's like an uncomfortable place to go. So we're replacing it with health. Body positivity is being replaced with health, I think, or like health conscious.
You
Yeah.
mentioned earlier that Santa was a symbol of comfort and he was seen as non-threatening because of his size. And
Hmm.
I think in many ways, as a society, we often use fatness as a way to symbolize safety. So
Hmm.
other terms that were associated with the appearance of Santa were boisterous, generous, non-judgmental, and inclusive.
Yeah.
Funny, the fact that a overweight person has more right to be funny than others, I've
Hmm.
always found fascinating. Humanity, relatability, and then this word, imperfection. So
Hmm.
were we just trying to create a version of Santa that felt approachable and
Hmm.
not threatening in the way that, children are not going to want to sit on his lap during the holiday photos?
Yeah, I guess. And so what does that mean? So we're shifting, like, okay, maybe that stuff is not, I mean, it's still probably important, but how do we, I mean, I think the task is going to be, if Santa actually is kind of shifting to a different physical appearance, how, I think those characteristics are still really important. How do you bring that through with someone who physically looks different? Also, remember, this is all, Santa was created for kids, right? And so, like, I don't know, do kids really, I don't know how they're going to grasp it all, but it is interesting.
And Jenny, just to a point that you mentioned was that idea of imperfection that I
Hmm.
really kind of sunk my teeth into and want to talk about a bit more, just especially in particular, because you mentioned like kids sitting on Santa's lap and being approachable to Santa. I mean, the premise of Santa, right? And I don't want to say it in any derogatory way to say like Santa's a creep or anything, but there's a guy who watches all of us all the time and then delivers gifts to children. He
Breaks
enters
into your
everyone's
home.
homes, everyone's home, and delivers just gifts to the children. There's a lot of things about his size, him being older. I see it as being disarming, comforting. Safety was the word, but I really want to really hook it back to this idea of how imperfection allows Santa to feel safe, how imperfection allows Santa to feel comforting and non-threatening, and a lot of other characters too. Sanika, I know you were referring to like even with children's characters who are bigger, like Patrick Star from SpongeBob or Baloo
Hmm.
from The Jungle Book. But
Hmm.
Homer
even like,
Simpson.
right, you take your Homer Simpson or your Peter Griffin, and I'm not going to say that they're like the nicest people, but there's a level of like relatability, average American look to them that makes it okay to like fail in front of them. They understand my conflicts, my struggles more
Yeah.
than maybe someone who's in shape.
And where does
Yeah.
the absence of weight go in society? Not only are we thinking about these fictional characters, but people that have been known for their size or their status. I'm thinking Oprah, somebody that I grew up following her weight loss journey, or these famous comedians tend to be heavily females that over-index for funny times curves.
Hmm.
What does it mean for them to lose weight? Like we lose out that relatability of following their journeys, their struggles, their triumphs, even as they go through the ups and downs of trying to fit into society. And part of what I was wondering as it comes to a younger generation, if these icons of society, whether it be fictional famous or Santa, if they become thinner, does it reinforce the idea that success ultimately requires conforming to standards, right? Undermining this idea of representation at large.
Totally. I think, yeah, I was gonna say, and like similar to Gabe's point, it's like you're like them, being heavier. That means you're supposed to not care, which gives me the right to also not care and like not feel pressure or whatever. So now that you are, where does that leave me? We look at them for that, just that support, I guess, and that right to think in a way that's freeing. And now if they're not showing up that way in our lives, like what does that mean for us? So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I like it. Let's see.
I think one thing that I'm taking away from this conversation and just the thinking that I have is like how we view and interpret, I guess, weight, how we view and interpret characters, I'll say, that are overweight, going back to this like approachability angle, and how this weight is like, I guess it starts with it being perceived as a flaw or an imperfection that I don't know if it's like they don't care about it, but it's like they're not hyper fixated on it. And I think that's you can come back to that when we have the conversation about how GLP-1s are kind of taking over the mainstream, and are we focusing too much on weight to become this better, more idealized version of ourselves, even though, we'll still have problems. Going back to the approachability point, I'm allowed to be, a bad friend or however a liar, whatever I am, whatever flaws that I have, because the flaw that is or is perceived to be weight is so visibly apparent that it's like there's already a level of comfort here. It's kind of like when you have friends, right? You meet somebody for the first time and it's like, and when you swear in front of them, it's like, oh, okay, this is that type of relationship that we're going to have, right? Now I can say whatever I want to say too. We can break taboos. We can, do things that would normally be stigmatizing because it's fine now.
Yeah.
I think one thing I would love to bring this to is what you were just connecting on, Gabe, this idea of friends. And the other part of the holidays, beyond the iconicness of Santa, is the celebrations around food that brings us all together. And as part of the GLP-1 consultancy, we've been really tracking for conversations around how people think about food when they are not thinking about food at all. And one of those tactics that people are doing are actually messing with their dosing around a GLP-1 so that they're not having as frequent dosing and they're able to actually indulge on the holidays. So kind of messing with the system in order to have the hunger only in which to indulge on those special occasions like they always have. So my question goes, how do we think about the holidays, celebrations, and the role of food culture that brings us together in a world where we're all aspiring to be slimmed down like Santa?
Yeah.
It's fascinating, and my first thought is like the relationship with food isn't like we're giving it the cold shoulder anymore as much as the relationship is just getting more complicated.
I don't know if we want to go here, but it reminds me of like how prior, we come together around food. Okay, cool. That's always been. And then I mean, we've always had diet culture. So then if you are dieting, not being on a GLP-1, you're just dieting, it's back in the day, you're fighting with yourself during the holidays to like not have to eat. And that's like consuming your mind. I feel like does a GLP-1 now present the opportunity of like, yes, you could still come together and you're also not like in this internal battle with yourself because you actually just don't have the hunger. Like you're able to, I don't know, like Jenny, does it do you then are you able to like then like get the focus of like what's beautiful and togetherness back in because food isn't so much on your mind because of like the loss of appetite? I don't know.
But also to Jenny's point, it's this I'm thinking about my GLP-1 dosing. I am very conscious of when I use it, when I don't. So it's perhaps that, maybe the thoughts of being hungry and the desire for food is less, but the thoughts about food have increased and they're more. And I think that's where the complication around like we sit around the table and we celebrate these meals and, this is time for family to be together. Sharing a meal is very pivotal to a lot of cultures as far as like gaining that mutual understanding, family, respect, love. How do I tell you how I feel about you? I'll show you through my cooking and you'll show me appreciation through eating it and everything like that.
yeah, I think what you just said is important. I think what it is the brain space that was occupied by what to not eat or what to eat, and like that whole thing has been replaced by, like, just thinking about like the medication. You're not thinking about the food, you're thinking about like the medication and like dosing and whatever. So the brain space is probably still occupied by something else. It's just something, it's occupied, it's just occupied by something different, I think.
And I love that you brought up community, Gabe, because, GLP-1s are not currently universally accessible to all. Even within our own country, people are still struggling to get on them. And those that might need or want them the most, we still have to fill that gap. So one thing that's interesting is this gap between the communities that have strong food-centered traditions that might resist the shift, right? Really push back on the notion of losing the role of Santa or food as part of the holiday celebrations, and potentially create a tension between modern trends and our cultural heritage, kind of a new divide we might need to be thinking about.
And I think something, I mean, so hey, I know this conversation is very much around Santa and weight loss, and that sort of thing. But I think part of our role, right, in medical anthropology is to think about trends and cultural shifts. And I feel like, yes, while Santa is shedding weight, I think a part of it is the weight trend and GLP-1s and body positivity, everything we touched on. I think the other piece of it is also the aging, the trends in aging. I know we've talked about that. I think we've talked about that in previous episodes, but like mostly just the trend that we're seeing of what it redefining what it means to age, and that it's not, what it once was. You're a grandmother that sits at home and knits and does nothing else, or, you're again, tying it back to Santa, you're not a fat old man that just sits in the North Pole and does nothing, and then you come down for one, like this new Santa, like I mentioned before, he has a whole life. There's other things, including working out, presumably, that he's interested in. And so I think it's also redefining, he's not going to be fat, and he's not going to just be your old person that does nothing. Like we are, and so I think it's on the tails of the aging shifts and trends as well. Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because honestly, I was feeling really down about Santa having a glow up. But if we take it through the lens of it's an aspirational state of relatability, and if what relatability is today is being somebody that's health conscious and somebody that actually is living a more fulfilled life the way they want it to, no matter the age, then maybe I can get on board with that.
Yeah, we should be happy for Santa.
I do kind of like that too. Let's
not tell Mrs. Claus.
Right, Santa has goals, everyone. Santa has a life.
Santa is creating a 2025 vision board, and this is on it. So, all right. Well, this was really fun. I'm glad we did this episode. I hope you all enjoyed it. I'm curious to see what society is going to do with him next year. And the reason I say that is because it's the point that we made earlier, which is an important one. I think that as society and culture changes, we often see the change first reflected in icons and what they're doing. And I think Santa is a perfect example of that, as we're seeing the weight loss and the aging sort of manifest into how he, be shown in how he's changing. I really feel like if you ask me, the next 3 years, you have this conversation in 3 years and Santa's going to have tattoos or a bald head, or maybe he already does. I feel like there was one Santa that maybe was bald. But anyways, I think, it's keeping track of Santa as the icon that's going to tell us, how society and culture is changing. And I think it would be funny,
Yeah, I mean, just to add on really quickly, I love how Santa is becoming like a canvas for culture to paint on and say, this is how we see holly jolly, this is how we see aging, this is how we see size. That's Santa with tattoos. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that out of my mind. Would it be like reindeers or something? I
have no idea. But the other piece of this that I think is cool is that Santa is an icon for all age groups. I feel like, right? Like kids, obviously, primarily, but then, adults too. And I think that him being used as a canvas, as you say, it's, I think it's intentional, and I think it could work. So let's see.
Just to close out the episode and close out the year, thank you for another great year of listening to Breaking the Code. Happy holidays. You celebrate it. If you're deciding to listen to this over the holiday break to get perhaps a break from your family, we welcome that as well. Jenny, also just want to give a shout out to you. Jenny recently joined the team. Is 8 months ago recently anymore? Joined the team. Oh my gosh, Jenny's amazing. seriously. And I just
Really,
wanted to take some
too
time to
kind,
say, like,
Gabe.
Jenny, thank you for coming on the podcast. Jenny, thank you for everything you've done for ever since I met you. You've been a great mentor, someone who I admire very much, and I'm glad we finally got you to come on the podcast.
I know it took 8 months, so we did it, and you're like a pro. But I second everything Gabe said. Obviously you guys know I've been on leave, but coming back and getting to work with Jenny has been awesome. I have a lot to learn from her, and she will be on other episodes. I am channeling that. So
Gosh, you're cutting all this, right? You're cutting all this.
We'll put it on our vision board.
Thanks, team. Appreciate you all, and I look forward to what the new year has in store.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. For Breaking the Code, I'm Gabe Rowling Cummings.
I'm Sonika Garcia.
Thanks for listening.
You.
See you next year.
Bye.